And good evening, I am Tracy Sinclair, and we are here at the election desk. We have some very early results that we want to share with you with what is going on with this primary election. Again, these are very early results. In many cases, we're actually only seeing 1 or 2 precincts checking in, but we do have kind of a pretty dramatic result, at least again, very early, coming through on the U.S. House district race. So taking a look at some of those numbers, these are our first numbers coming in. At this point, Mary Peltola has 50% of the vote with 33,893 votes coming through. Nick Begich is in second, 17,940 at 26%, and Nancy Dahlstrom is coming in third at 13,299, again about 20% of the vote. This is with an estimated 55.5% of the vote coming in so far. The other contested races that we're seeing, because of the way that we do our open primaries, the top 4 go through, so only 3 races have more than 4 candidates. So this is that other race, District 36 in the State House, and currently Brandon Kowalski is leading that race at 35%, again about 55% of the vote coming through. Those are the other names in that race. And then looking at Senate Seat L, and we've been talking a lot about this seat. This is out in Eagle River, and at this point, 34% of the vote is going to the incumbent Kelly Merrick. So still very early in the race, but in some cases we are seeing a number of votes coming in. And earlier today, well, out at our out in Wasilla, we have our Joe Cadot, and Joe is there with one of those candidates for the U.S. House. Joe, what's going on out at the race out in Wasilla? Joe, you are out there live in Wasilla.
We're live at the Chop House in Wasilla right now with candidate for the U.S. House of Representatives, Nick Begich is here with me, and we just got some of those results, as I'm sure you've heard, a few minutes ago. And Nick, thank you so much for talking with us again tonight.
Absolutely.
How are you feeling?
I feel great. You know, at the end of the day, Alaskans have gotten a lot of messaging, right? There's been ads on the TV, ads on the radio, a lot of money being spent from outside the state. But I think what we're hearing tonight is that Alaskans are going to decide who they want to represent them on the Republican ticket. And I'm honored to have their support. It's early, but we're very encouraged to see the results coming in so far.
And what is your reaction to these preliminary results? Are you surprised by being ahead of Dahlstrom but behind Peltola?
I wouldn't characterize it as surprise or not surprised. I'm honored to have the support of so many conservatives and Republicans across the state. You know, at the end of the day, we recognize that Alaska needs a strong voice in the House. Alaska needs someone who's going to show up for work, who's going to vote in our interest, and who's going to be a full-throated advocate for the resources and the people of the state of Alaska. I want to be that voice for us in Congress, and I'm looking forward to taking this campaign on to November and hopefully be our representative in the House.
And so for those people out there who have not voted in the primary but may vote in the general election, what's your message to some voters out there who are undecided right now, who might be finding out about you for the first time?
Well, I think it's really important. Make sure that you are fully informed. Do your research on the candidates. There's a lot of money spent on ads, and that's important, but at the end of the day, you know, what defines a candidate often doesn't fit within a 30-second or a 60-second ad. So I think it's important, do your research, understand where people are at, understand what they can contribute to the state of Alaska, and then make an informed decision. This is our state, this is our country. This state and the nation belong to you. And so I think that's the message people need to understand, is that we hear so often from DC that, you know, we're property of the U.S. government. Our property is the property that, no. The government belongs to us. We need to make sure that we are making our voices heard at the ballot box, and I'd encourage everyone out there in the state of Alaska, please vote.
Last thing that I have is talk about the party you've got going on here tonight. Anybody notable here you want to mention, or talk about what's going on here tonight?
You know, there's so many state house candidates and officials here. I'd be remiss if I miss anyone, but we're just thrilled to have the support of so many folks from around the state. We've got a ton of volunteers that have traveled from various parts of the state to be with us tonight. We're at the Chop House in Wasilla and having a great time. People are excited. There's a lot of energy and enthusiasm here, and we're just really looking forward to what happens next.
All right, Nick Begich, who's a candidate for the U.S. House of Representatives at the Chop House in Wasilla. Back to you guys. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Looking forward to it.
And thank you, Joe, and thank you to Nick Begich as well for joining us. And joining me now is Rebecca Polsha. And Rebecca, we're very early in this process. Any surprises that we've seen so far?
You know, I think some people might be surprised by the Nick Begich and Nancy Dahlstrom race at this point. I have been hearing throughout the newsroom, as the newsroom's tallying up all these votes, I've heard Beth Ferge on the phone with Nancy Dahlstrom, the Lieutenant Governor, and I've also heard the Zoom that is being done with Nancy Peltola. So some of the things that Nancy Peltola has said is that she's excited about this campaign, that she says is focused on solutions. She calls it the most contested congressional race in the nation. She also says this is the dry run for what could be the next possible race. And I have also, just heard Beth Ferge on the phone with Nancy Dahlstrom. She said that she was feeling good. She, of course, has been on the campaign with ads that have Donald Trump in her campaign ads saying that he endorses her. So it's been very interesting to see. I kind of assumed at this point that Nancy Dahlstrom and Nick Begich would be closer, but at this point, Nancy Dahlstrom has 20% of the vote to Nick Begich's 26%. Mary Peltola, though, at 50%. And again, she says she's feeling a lot of enthusiasm about the ideas and the future and the solutions.
And it is interesting because we do ranked choice voting here in Alaska. So that when we get to the general election, one person needs to get 50% plus one vote to make it through. If not, we do the ranking of the secondary votes. Now, that's not what happened today. Today, we all just voted for one person, and the top four go through. Almost all, except 3 of our races, had 4 or fewer candidates in them.
Correct.
So all of those candidates are going through. If you look at our ticker, though, you can see that we are continuing to see, we want to give you at least the numbers of what the candidates have done. But again, all except those 3 races, and we're talking the U.S. House, District 36 in the House, State House, and Senate Seat L. With the exception of that, all candidates that are currently running will go through to the primary. So let's take a look at the the House District 36 as well. And we are expecting to see, as we said, all 5 or 4 of the 5 will go through. Right now, the leaders are Brandon Kowalski, Cole Snodgrass, Rebecca Schwenke, and Dana Mock. And then in those last 2 positions, because there are 6 people in this race, Pamela Good, and we're looking at James Field. So at this point, we've got the top 4, are those 4 right there, and taking a quick look at District L. Kelly Merrick is the incumbent. We spoke with all of the challengers for this race, several of them Republican. We have 3 Republicans running against.
And what was interesting in that race was they had all said that Kelly Merrick wasn't Republican enough, that she wasn't conservative enough. They really all went after her. And so it was interesting to see, 32% to 42, or excuse me, 32 to 34. That's still very close, but that was an interesting thing, and definitely a race that we're absolutely keeping an eye on because it's just so close, and it's an interesting race. And to see it these numbers as they are now, things can definitely change, but the campaign against her, definitely, she's not conservative enough.
Yes, that was interesting because typically when you're in the, at this point in the primary, you aren't expecting to see a lot of the same party running against the incumbent. So it was a little bit shocking to see that. Now, of course, we are going to have continued coverage on Channels 2 and Channel 5 for our election coverage for tonight. So you can expect to see that. So stay with us and we will continue our election coverage, as I said, on Channel 2 and Channel 5. And jumping back on here, we do have, of course, we have our ticker going across the bottom, giving you an update on all of the races. It is, as we've said, almost all of the races, all 4 of the candidates or fewer will go through. There's only 3 races that are what we could technically say are contested. But we do have Steve Kirch. He is out over at the Democrat Watch Party. And so, Steve, we just wanted to check in. What's the mood over there? How are things where you're at in the world?
Yeah, Tracy, as you can see behind me, it's pretty noisy right now. People are starting to filter in. Now, this is Democratic Watch Party, of course, and we have some of our representatives here, like Senator Forrest Dunbar, Senator Matt Clayman, some of the candidates, Carolyn Hall's here, Kai Holland. So, you know, Ms. Peltola, Representative Peltola, she just came on, did a Zoom interview, or with people who are having watch parties across the state. And she talked about optimism. She thanked her supporters. She thanked her family. She talked about resiliency. And, when the results came up and they showed that Ms. Peltola was in the lead, she had more than 50% of the vote at the time of that vote, which was about 15 minutes ago. This crowd was very excited. I talked to Forrest Dunbar, Senator Forrest Dunbar, about what his reaction was to the early lead. He talked about, like, hey, he's optimistic, but, hey, this is just a primary. As Ms. Peltola said, this is a dry run, but he feels optimism right now. I asked him, of Nick Begich and Lieutenant Governor Nancy Dahlstrom, which one he thought would, be a tougher match for Ms. Peltola in the general election. He said he couldn't say at this time. He did say, like, he did consider them both kind of center right, far right, but he did say, they are two different, very different candidates. So he couldn't say which one would be the tougher candidate. I also asked him, because Democrat National Convention is today, with Kamala Harris, I asked him if he's disappointed that Ms. Peltola has not come out and formally endorsed, Kamala Harris, and she has not even said if she will vote for Ms. Harris in the general election. He did not seem concerned at all. He said that's Ms. Peltola. She's entitled to how she wants to run her campaign, entitled to how she wants to vote. He did not sound concerned at all about those actions and those hurting her in the general election. But, this watch party is going to wrap up around 10. But, there is optimism in this room right now for Ms. Peltola.
Well, Steve, thank you so much for hanging out there, because I know I kept telling you to sort of stand by, that we would come to you in just a second. So I really appreciate you hanging out there, and get ready, because as we said, we will be back at 10 live across at our different regions once again. So Steve, thank you so much for joining us. Let's go ahead and take one more look at those numbers. We were just talking about the fact that at this point, Representative Peltola does have about 50% of the vote that's in. Now that's about 55.5% of the vote that has come in. Nick Begich is in second place with about 26%, and then Nancy Dahlstrom at 20%. Of course, this is the largest, this is the one election that has the entire state voting. So then when you drop down, the other candidates are all reading at 0. They're all below that 500 vote mark. So these, we will take a look at them just so we can see where they're at. But overall, there are 12 candidates. Really, one of those top 3 look to be the people that will be heading toward Washington once again. Again, 50%, 26% for Nick Begich, and Nancy Dahlstrom showing up at 20%. Checking out House District 36, we've got 35% for Brandon Kowalski. This was about 40% of the vote in, so still a long way to go on that. Only 789 votes tallied to hit that 35%. Cole Snodgrass also looking at the numbers. Those just updated right there. So 838. Now Brandon Kowalski has 33%. So we just got updated numbers. Let's see if our numbers for the House district have changed. Mary Peltola now sitting still at 50%, 43,079 votes. Nick Begich up to 27% with 23,523. And Nancy Dahlstrom still at 17%. Or 20% with 17,696. So we do have brand new updated results there. And taking a look at seat L, again, very close. This is with 78.8% of the vote in. This is the Eagle River District Senate seat. This is the one when we talked to several of the Republican challengers, they felt that the incumbent wasn't conservative enough, wasn't Republican enough, and that is Kelly Merrick. And she is currently sitting at 34%. Jared Gooker is right behind her at 32%. The difference between them is less than 100 votes. So we are looking at a very close race with those two. 78.8% of the vote in. Lee Hammermeister is the Democrat in this race. He's at 830 votes with 14%. Ken McCarty, another Republican, at 618 votes, showing up 10%. Now again, 4 of the 5 candidates will go through. Sharon Jackson at 7%, coming through with 417 votes. So 4 of the 5 candidates will go through to the general election. At this point, those look to be the top 4 with 78.8% of the vote. In the House District 36, the 4 that are currently in the lead, again, this is only 45% of the vote, so things definitely can change. And we are looking at a difference of not a lot of votes, about 400 between first and second place. And then here are those final 2 challengers showing up in that race for House District 36. Showing up in the U.S. House, we have recently seen an update, 43,079 for Representative Peltola. She is the incumbent in the race and still holding steady at 50%, with Nick Begich gaining just a percentage point in this last update. Nancy Dahlstrom still at 20%. This is almost 72% of the vote coming through, so we are seeing some progress on there. As you can see across the bottom of our screen, we do have that ticker coming through, and you can see the different races. Right now we are on that House race, the U.S. House race coming through. We are going to leave that up for a little while so that we can continue to see those numbers as they update. So just kind of stay with us. We can keep the ticker up here so you can continue to watch, and then we will have the latest news, including some new comments from the various candidates across the state, and that will be coming up on Channel 2 and on Channel 5 coming up at 10 o'clock, so stay with us. And thank you for joining us. We will return at 10 on Channel 2 and 5 with the latest election results.